turn this over to questions to each of Will, Stephanie, and Nikki and Neil. I'm going to take the honor of asking the first one just to get the thing going, and I'll try not to take it over because I can do that. But Stephanie, I was interested. We had a pandemic. You have an in-store operation and all the things that goes with having a lease and an in-store operation that you want to expand. You have a delivery operation. What do you prefer? Isn't it better to get customers that you can touch, and how do you balance that?
I prefer the stores. I just being able to talk to people and answer their questions. And we have some customers, like we have awesome, amazing discussions sometimes because some of them really want to help. And with you know, any online business is very, like, you don't talk to people. It's all automatic and there's no sense of community like there is with the store. So I love the store. I started all online in 2017 and now I'm like, it's great because for some people that's what they want to do. It's super convenient, but having the store takes it's a whole other dimension where you can really create a community around waste reduction. I can work with, like, around me there are restaurants, there are coffee shops, and we can talk about how they can reduce their own waste. You know, it's a whole different level.
Right, but you have one store and it's in Berkeley, but yet you're reaching people all over the Bay Area because of the delivery. So what has more impact?
Right now, the stores has more impact because people love shopping. People love being able to come to the store and just smell the products and ask us questions. And so it's funny because it's really the opposite of what I thought when I started. But I realized that no, like, people really enjoy shopping and just enjoy being in a store. And every time they come in, apparently it smells really good in the store, which I don't realize anymore. But so yeah, I love it. It's much better.
Neil, you had a question? But you have to unmute.
I have a question for Stephanie, but first I want to say I grew up working in a perfume factory, and going back and forth on the subway smelling of perfume started a lot of conversations. But my question to you is, Nikki pointed out that her products are really saving a lot of money besides cutting down on waste. Are your customers, let's say, how much do they save, and how much do they save by not having to deal with packaging other than a reusable package?
Yeah, so it really depends on the products. For some products, because also I really want to focus on sustainable products with non-toxic ingredients. Like, I'm never going to sell products like Tide in bulk. It's for some products, it's going to be the same price as what you can find in a Whole Food. So it's not a low price. For from other products, though, they can really save money because one of the brands we work with, they make concentrate. So it's much cheaper. The customers just have to dilute. And then for some products also that are reusable, you can really save money. But you have to invest. Like, one of the best example is a stainless steel razor. And all you have to do is replace the blade, okay? And the blade costs 30 cents. So it is much cheaper than buying a new, like, single-use razor. So, but at first you have to invest $30, $40 in your razor. So
that fits with what I knew growing up in that industry. The cost of the bottle and the label was higher than the cost of the ingredients in the bottle. This was shampoo, cologne, and liquids. So I completely understand how you could save money by eliminating the package. Thank you. And thank you, Nikki. These are inspiring stories making big impacts. That's really great. Saving 6 pounds a student a year, a term or a year, however you measured it, is quite an impact. And of course, getting people their good products and reusables is wonderful. In fact, my daughter lives in Montclair, and they just opened up a similar store in Montclair, New Jersey. So she's quite thrilled.
Does anybody have questions for our panelists before I go into interrogative mode? Dan?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Will a question. Will, as you know, your full interview is about 45 pages long, and I lived in that interview for about 6 weeks while I was editing it. And I wonder, there was a lot that was left out. I know that the parts that have been read are only about 6 to 8 pages of the total. So one of the things that really struck me as very promising was your concept of a soil bank, and the idea that farmers that you know, most of them do not actually own their own land, and you want a carbon bank that pays them for increasing the carbon content of the soil. And that would be something that could actually be taken with them if they get kicked off the farm, so that they could take that carbon credit with them elsewhere and spend it elsewhere. Can you go into more detail on that?
Yeah, sure, love to. Yeah, it's something that I hear a lot from younger farmers that don't own the land. They lease the land, and they've worked on improving the soil, raise the organic matter from say 1% to 5, 6, 7% organic matter in the soil, which gave them great benefits in water savings, in productivity, in reducing weeds in the farms, etc., etc. Now they're going to get kicked off that farm, and all the money they invested in growing that carbon in the soil is gone. And actually, most likely, particularly if it goes to a development and they're going to build homes on that land, then that carbon will be completely lost. That is a resource that we do not value at this point. There is no monetary value on that. And I think it's time, if we want to save this planet, that we have to monetize that value. And so what I like to see is that we create some sort of a closed carbon bank where the money can only be used. And I want to have a firewall on capitalism out here, because capitalism is about extracting money out of it, you know. It's like, and so this has to be a regenerative economy in a closed system where we have a pool of money that is being used to grow carbon in the soil. And so when this farmer moves away from the soil, that 8% carbon has a certain value. And believe me, that carbon value, the closer we're going to get to the no turning around point for humankind to live on Earth, that carbon value is going to go up and up and up to find solutions to save the planet. And so we set up a carbon value for the soil, and that farmer now gets paid to build that soil somewhere else. If the owner of the land is now diminishing the carbon in that soil, then he has to pay for the carbon that's being lost to the atmosphere and put that into the bank so that we can restore more land to regrow carbon again. That's the idea behind this here. And it's pretty much, you know, it's like, but what made me think of it, Switzerland has its own second currency besides the franc. They never participate in the euro, they still have the franc. But I believe it was in World War I, they set up a currency because the banks would not loan to the farmers. And they set up their own currency to loan to farmers. And actually that currency is still alive today to loan to farmers. And this would have like a similar concept, except it would be very specifically built around carbon.
Thank you.
Doug?
Yeah, for Will, I got a question about one of the slides you showed was 100,000 tons per year of compost, and that's with only 1% going to landfill. That's an incredibly efficient operation. I presume that's plant debris as opposed to food waste.
That did not have food scraps in it, indeed, and that's and we did a lot of education to the public in order to keep that contaminant rate as low as possible. With my new facility, my goal is still with food scraps that I will not exceed 3% contamination by 3 years after I'm in business. Because to me, I think that people are trainable. it is just, it's like we have not done enough in it. And actually, a lot of the big garbage companies have taken a different route. It's like, you can contaminate the material as much as you want, and we'll post-process it at the end. To me, garbage in is garbage out. It's like you can never clean that material up to the fullest extent. And so my emphasis is really work with the people, get them to respect the material, and get them to understand that they are dealing with a resource. And yes, they have to pay to get rid of a resource, and that's the hard part. It's like to sell to people. But that is the way it goes. And Sonoma County, I think, is the ideal playing ground for this, because we are pretty progressive out here, that I think that I can set that standard.
Will, where is your facility located?
I don't have it anymore. This is the
Oh.
interesting part. I had a very, very successful company. I had the environmentalists supporting me. I had the farmers community supporting me. I had the landscape industry supporting me. Republic took over the landfill, and they had a meeting with me. And they said, Will, within the year after we take over the landfill from the county, you'll be out of business. And somehow the neighborhood received money. You can imagine where they may have gotten the money from, filed a lawsuit against our company. And even the water board wrote a letter to the county saying, we do not want to put this business out of business because they provide a service to the county that is invaluable. And that letter was never shared with other municipalities in order so that they could close down our facility so that Republic would take over the landfill.
That's a long, ugly story too, Will. I'm sorry. We would have, I would love to have you share more of it. But Nikki said something that has been pricked my ear, and I have to ask a question about it. I know that you're a B corporation, and I know that means that, making profits is not the end all be all. And I understand your competitors, some of your competitors are retail chains like Home Depot that has way more buying power than you do with manufacturers. But you also said that you compete on price with them. And I'm wondering, why do you have to compete on price with them? A lot of niche businesses that are mission driven, sell their story along with their products, and they don't compete on price. Why wouldn't that work for you?
That's a great question. And we are totally not in comparison. We're definitely more expensive. I think, and Stephanie brought this up as well, is like, it's just a question that you're constantly having to answer is like, well, are you cheaper? Are you cheaper? People want to know, like, can you save them money? I can find this stuff cheaper on Amazon. And a lot of people understand, and they love the mission, and they love the story, and we definitely tell that story. And we're way more open about our story too. We used to be kind of like embarrassed that we were such a small, like, cowboy operation, but now we're like, nope, we're two people in a warehouse. So that's what you get. So I think there's like, when you're asked that question so often, you kind of like grow a defensive skin of like, you have to kind of bring it up before people ask of like, can you compete with Office Max and Staples? And when we were stocking classrooms in bulk, you were getting less stuff than what you were getting on your back to school shopping list. So like item by item, were more expensive, but when you switch to our model, you're getting less, but you're spending less, but you're only really getting what you need because these students are just throwing everything away that they're not using. So you're right. We do sell the story. We do talk about the mission and the value behind our products, and how we're not mass produced. But it's just, you're competing with people's expectations of what they will pay for a binder or a planner. And that's just the world. Amazon, everything's cheap and everything's fast and everything's free shipping. So
They're saving the world, and they're not.
that's true.
They're not going to space either.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I wish we could sit people down and be like, okay, look, this is Amazon's supply chain. Like, this is their labor, you know, like this is what they're doing, but not everybody knows these things going in, and you only have a couple seconds with some people. So, but for the most part, most people understand and they get it pretty quickly.
Do you have anybody that can sell it for you? Are there, for example, when I represented Pet Food Express, they made an incredibly smart decision to support rescue centers, because when people adopt pets and they get a little free bag of food with it, they go back to the pet store. And so the rescue centers were selling the company and selling the story. Who can do that with you? The school?
Well, we used to be the schools because they would sell it to the parents. We were doing wholesale, and I know Heather just sent Stephanie an email about this. We were doing wholesale with like local resellers, and not local resellers, people like in Wisconsin who opened up a zero waste store. It's actually really incredible how many zero waste stores are opening up around the United States that I would have had no idea about if they hadn't reached out, but like all in the most random places that you wouldn't think of. And that was great. But the challenge now that we're faced with is having enough product. We don't have enough product. So we need, and with making our own products, you need like a major outlay of capital. And we didn't have that problem before because we were resellers. So we could buy 200 binders at a time, or, 400, and then wait and then order more. But now we need to buy thousands of these products. So it's a big cash outlay. And we know we won't be able to keep up with demand for the back to school shopping season. So we hope that next year we can expand and have enough product for resellers and for wholesale, and then we can get into stores. But right now, we're just trying to hold on to our hats with direct to consumer.
Are there enough like-minded companies so you could form a buying group and be able to buy more product through that or get better pricing?
Maybe if they were open to paying us in advance, if it was like a pre-order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was wondering, if you could have like a co-op buying, it's like, and do it that way. And with this, it has potential, and maybe that it's a co-op that could apply for this, but for a GoFundMe campaign, it's like where you can raise the capital that you need to actually kick the production up and get what you need.
Yeah, we're gonna start a equity crowdfunding campaign pretty soon.
Yeah, because that seems like you're ideally situated for that, and it's like maybe have an introductory price for people that contribute into it, as the payback for it, as they often see out there, but make it lucrative for them to invest in it, and you end up with a capital that you can get your mass production going.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing as well. Excuse me, Mary Lou, I'll be just a second.
Oh, that's fine.
But you don't have to share your business, but I just wanted to, I don't know how much you're talking about, but another reuse group, not quite your group, but Repurpose Center down in Gainesville, they went to the banks and they got all, couldn't raise money to buy their expanded warehouse. It's a reuse project, a business. And they went to their supporters, and their supporters came up with 200,000, and their supporters framed a loan to help them, as opposed to a bank that will give you a loan to screw you, whatever. So if it's I don't know the amount of money, but you may just find that your network will support you.
Absolutely. Yep. We are setting that up now. We're like writing all the details for the crowdfunding campaign, and if anyone's interested, I think the best way to learn about that, we'll make an announcement on our newsletter. I can put our website in the chat, and then you can sign it if you're in. We're not like email marketing people, so we're not going to get a lot of emails from us.
2 people in a warehouse.
Yeah, exactly. And we're busy packing orders. So
you do that in between.
Right. And Any other questions before I monopolize this?
Mary Lou had a question.
Mary Lou?
And two after if I can.
Well, I wanted to make a comment in response, John, to your question about can't you sell your story? And I just, in Urban Ore's experience, Urban Ore has been doing retail for some time now. Today, in fact, is our 40th anniversary of incorporation. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we sell our story all the time, and people love it, and they love us, and they think our story is terrific. They love our purpose. They love it that we're trying to make money, but we never sacrifice, you know, our purpose and our motivation for that, and they just think it's a wonderful thing, and then they ask us for a discount.
Been there.
So, you know, they can love you to death.
Well, if you
Well,
have,
yeah, and this,
if you
just
have
this
something
morning,
nobody else has and that people really want, you don't have to do a 20% markup on the product. You can do a 50% markup on the product, which makes a big difference. So,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, Stephanie and Nikki have products that nobody else has. Urban Ore has lots of stuff that nobody else has, but you have to go look for it. So,
just this morning,
Well, it's non-virtual, that's why.
just this morning, I got an email from Steve Lautzy. And he said, oh, you know, we're doing a crowdfunding campaign or a different thing anyway, but basically he wanted donations to East Bay Depot for creative reuse. They have a elderly truck that got stolen a month ago, and they're kind of dead in the water without their truck. So they need money for that. So I ponied up some money from Urban Ore, and it turned out that by the time I got to it, they were already at $1,875.
Great news.
They're heading up real fast, I think. And I got a nice letter back from Steve saying, thank you very much for your contribution.
Mm-hmm.
We put in 500. So, you know, that's, yeah, I think this method of funding can pay dividends really quickly. Another thing that happened with us was right at COVID, when we were scared to death and we had closed down for 3 days and we finally figured out we were an essential business. Our staff got together with some friends of theirs, did a crowdfunding thing, and that raised $20,000 for our health plan. And they put it out that way. They said, we want our health plan.
Please save our health plan.
Continue it. And we raised about 20,000 before the thing was over. It was real fast. And they did a wonderful little video. I mean, I couldn't believe the quality of it. It was amazing. And it was all employee done. They didn't even talk to me about it, or Mary Lou that I know of.
Nope.
So Will, I had a question.
Yeah.
In your talk, you went through several different things. Among them were, there are specifications that are important. There's the importance of being a market maker. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, particularly given your history, where does government fit in? How can government best help compost? Should they regulate it? Should they make markets for it? What would you have them do if you were God?
Well, I think right now, and I'm just looking at the hurdle that we have to overcome. SB 1383 passed. We need about 100 new facilities in California, the size that Sonoma Compost was, that will take in about 100,000 tons per year. Many compost facilities have been in permitting for about 3 to 5 years and still not running. And some of them actually are holding off in even starting to run because it is almost impossible to get a facility permitted at this point. The air board, for instance, you know, it's like every time they have a compost facility that permit, the next facility has a higher standard. The next facility has a higher standard. And it's really the highway to hell for composters. So I think that, and I think air quality is a perfect example here. So we are actually the solution to SB 1383, which is on emissions from landfill, which falls under the responsibility of the air board. And so we are their solution. And instead, they're actually putting up the roadblocks in permitting compost facilities. So if I get to build my compost facility in Sonoma County, I have already set up a system where I want to be the fastest permitted compost facility in California. Right off the bat, I would sit down with the air board, water boards, local government, et cetera, bring them all in one room and set up ground rules. One little trick that the air board has, for instance, played with is you go to the EIR, they get to see your plan of what you're going to build out there, and they get input to it. You certify the EIR. Now you're going to go for an air permit, and they say, okay, we want you to change, open up the EIR again. We want you to change this here. That, in my rule, will not exist. You had a chance to look at this here during the EIR. You will not open up EIR again and make additional requirements in the permitting process. When the EIR is certified, you thereby will grant a permit for the compost facility. So those are the kind of things we need to work on, because else you go in a merry-go-round that you're never going to get permitted. And we need the facilities now to meet our goals. And so they're shooting themselves in the foot. We're not saying don't regulate the compost facilities. We're saying make it workable. We can work around having standards set and building compost facilities that are actually beneficial to the environment. But let us know where we stand, work with us, but don't keep us hanging for years and years before we can operate. That's expensive.
That sounds like a lot like the low-income housing advocates, the people that want to build low-income housing. They want a streamlined process.
That's what you need. Absolutely.
So,
and I think that's doable. I have floated this around, and I have a lot of interest from many groups that say that this really makes sense to do so. And then once we have, if I get to lead this program, and I invite any compost facility actually to take the lead on this here, so I don't have to have the headache. But once that's in place, that can serve as a blueprint for other facilities to follow as well.
So in a triage of either lead, follow, or get out of the way, you'd like government to get out of the way.
Yeah, but it's not that I want to get out of the way. I think they do have a responsibility. I must say, I don't trust people, particularly when they come from a capitalistic point of view. I don't trust them. It's all about extracting money, and the external cost doesn't count for them. I really think that we need to live, and we as environmentalists, soil science, from a organics recycling point of view, we need to be responsible in what we do, and we have to look in our own house in how we can build a facility that actually is environmentally sound. And we have right now technology that can do that. We can reduce emissions by 85% compared to the windrow composting that I used to do. We should do that if that's available. Capital cost is not what runs the cost for a compost facility. It's operation cost. And, you know, it's like, and so spending a little bit more money to build the right facility is the right way to go. But we need to know where we stand. And that's something that the air board needs to do, is say, it's like, we give you a security of how you can permit these facilities.
Thanks, that's very interesting. Does anybody else have questions for our panel?
I have one question for Will. So in my past career, I worked on biogas with farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved from, I was in France, and when I moved from France here, I was surprised to see that there was almost no biogas facilities. Yeah. Did you ever study this? Like, why?
Yes. Actually, the plant that I was proposing for Sonoma County had an anaerobic digestion facility associated with it. I'm actually going to remove it from my plan. And the reason for this is, in Europe, you have two things that make AD possible. The tipping fees for organics recycling are much higher than here in the United States. And the price of energy is much higher in the United States. So on two ends, you're going to get more income. Now, we have at this point for renewable natural gas incentives to do renewable natural gas for transportation. And that gets a very high dollar per joule or whatever unit you want to put it in. The problem with that is, with the turnover of the government, and Trump comes back in office in 2024, God forbid, but those incentives will be removed. And so how can you as a company build a sustainable budget on the high price if that's not guaranteed for a long time? Because my contract will be for 30 years. And so that's a real dilemma. And I think that makes it very scary. The petroleum industry has long-term guarantees on subsidies they get from the government, but for alternative energy, it does not exist. That puts us at a competitive disadvantage that I think makes it very difficult to bring AD to the United States.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. In France, there was a whole system where you get credits.
Yeah.
I guess that's true, and you make money.
And they're long-term. If you do that for the project, they're there for the term of your project. They don't do that over here, and so that brings with it a huge risk factor.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Neil, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. In our follow-up, in our part of the country, DC, Maryland, even up to New York and down to the Carolinas, their European companies as well as American companies are just trying to get bonded low-cost loans from the government to build AD plants. One is coming in probably this year in Jessup, Maryland, equidistant between DC and Baltimore. There seems to be rapid investment in it. Do you see this as a threat? If this were happening in California, would this be a threat to the composters?
Well, I don't think that AD should stand by itself. I believe that the digestate from an anaerobic digestion facility should be diverted to a compost facility to actually turn the organic matter from that facility in a stabilized form, be a nutrient source for the other compost, so that you can put a high quality product back on the market. They take mostly food scraps in the AD systems. Well, that's how we can really improve the nutrient value of our compost. And so what these AD plants do a lot of times is they put zero value on the digestate. They just find a way to get rid of it. That is not soil building. I think that, to put another term out here, I think we need to start looking at ecosystem values. And, look at, it's like, what does the organics industry look like, and what are the components that they actually bring as stacking function to ecosystem value, and have investors look at that and say, I want to invest in that value. And that will promote something different than just the capitalistic structure. Now they're going to invest in what the intrinsic value is of this ecosystem design.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I'd like to say something from the perspective of the Recycling Archives Project. We now have roughly about 55 interviews, and of those about 20 or 25 have been edited. All the way through, there's a theme of recyclers being shut down, attacked, marginalized, pushed aside, regulated unfairly, treated unfairly. What we're up against is a predisposition to waste, and it's a zero-sum game. Every time we take a ton of anything out of the waste stream, and we call it the discard supply, the wasters lose, and they are in power. And somehow that power, that clamp on power by people who are trained to waste and think that is the natural order of things, has to be broken.
Yeah.
And I think that is really the task for the younger folks. You have to start looking long-term at breaking the power of this monopolistic wasting industry that thinks that wasting will always be with us, that it's sort of their God-given right to have anything that is made, put in the ground, destroyed, however it's done through incineration or any other kind of Rube Goldberg contraption that probably won't work for more than a year before it's shut down. These are old stories in this field, and they keep happening over and over again. And we have to break that monopoly power.
Well, one thing that the ZWAC is trying to do is share this kind of information, so we're at least aware of it. I know Mary Lou had a question, and then Will.
Well, I wanted to ask, following on Dan's comment, to break the monopoly power, since it is a zero-sum game for the service, I wanted to ask if, while people are considering how to break that monopoly, if they factor in the fact that the monopoly wasting contracts, collection contracts that most municipalities let out, the municipalities get a kickback. And people don't talk about that. It's the money back to the city that they rely on in their general fund that recycling doesn't offer them. And I think we need to factor that in. So that's just my only comment.
How do they get, I'm not familiar with that. How do they get a kickback?
Is it the franchise fee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the franchise fee. They get money back when they let a monopoly agreement out to a collector like Waste Management or Republic or whoever. They get a franchise fee. Now, recyclers do not have never offered a franchise fee. So what can we advertise for us? I am of the opinion that our businesses must be better inherently for the economy, certainly for the municipal environment, than any wasting business is. But I think we need to develop our perspective and our calculations in order to make an argument on behalf of our industry financially, because cities are not willing to, they're not willing to talk about this stuff in public because, well, I don't know why, but I speculate that maybe they just don't want to let their citizens know that they depend on garbage. It's like, I always said, you can't make your money off the devil and then say what you want is the angels, because you're making your living off the devil. So they don't want to let their citizens know they're making their money off the devil. When we are the angels, what are we going to say? And that's what I want to know. How can we fight that franchise fee?
I feel like it's very related to, Alina has a question on the cost, like the cost of externalities. And the fact that, I don't know if there's any study that shows the positive impact of recycling, reusing, composting, and the amount of money that city government saves by going that way instead of going to the landfills. And it's related to reduction in emissions, maybe more jobs and things like that. I don't know if there's any study that shows, hey, if you do that, then that's how much money you're gonna save, and it's maybe bigger than that money that they get from landfill or from wasting.
I don't know of any study either, and I think we need to have some. We need to do this analysis.
There are studies, though, on how recycling provides a lot more jobs than the wasting industries. So there are, and even going back further, there were studies that I think, Neil, you were involved with too.
Well, Brenda did that work.
Yeah, and there was also, how do you compare it to hard rock mining and things like that? So there's pieces of it, but it certainly needs to be updated too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and factored in, with specific comment for the municipal budget.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a city. I'm losing my franchise fees. You can talk to me about potential jobs all you want. I have a budget deficit if I give up my franchise fees. What are you going to do? What are you going to say about that?
Sonoma County at times has had non-exclusive franchise systems where the recyclers paid franchise fees too. What if Urban Ore paid a franchise fee?
Yeah. Another idea.
In addition to the service fee that we charge,
Right.
Well, Mary Lou, I agree with you. It's a kickback, but let's say for a city it's $1 million. Why can't they just reduce the cost of services by $1 million? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but is that conceivable, a way of handling the problem?
Well, if you reduce the cost of service, what are you then eliminating somebody's job? And are they a Teamster or SEIC or some union that's going to get so totally in the face of city council? The city council will never do a thing like that.
Okay, I think this is a difficult problem.
It's
we
just
can't
a question. Yeah.
It's 7:30.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
It's probably a little controversial. Zero waste is part of the 3 R's, you know, reduce, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, the reduce part. Has
Yeah.
recycling stood in the way of effectively work on reduce? In other words,
Yeah.
we find markets for recycling, and now we need to feed the recycling industry in order to support that recycling industry, and actually working on reducing where people do not have to recycle anymore might undercut some of the investments made in the recycling industry. And in Europe, for instance, a lot of incinerators were built to deal with, because they said that you could not get over 60% recycling. Well, right now, with the position they find them in, yes, you can get higher than 60% recycling, but they cannot afford it because they have these fuel hogs that they built that need 40% of the waste stream in order to pay off the debt that they have on there. And does the recycling industry stand in the way of reduce, in other words, produce less waste?
I think, if I may, I think in two ways. One, of course, are the bottle bills industry. The Coca-Cola wants to be a good recycler, but they don't want to be a good refiller, obviously.
Right.
But the second, I lost my train of thought. It had to do with getting rid of bottles. It'll come back to me. I apologize. But my first thought was that is one of the problems.
Yeah.
If I may, when we talk to our customers or everything we publish about the 5R and the zero waste mindset, we always say recycling comes last.
Yeah.
Like first, refuse, reduce, reuse, but recycling like rot, compost, and then recycle.
Yeah, I thought of my comment. I wrote myself a note to remind me, and that is the aluminum can. The aluminum can is an environmental sin. To use aluminum and all the energy for your soda and then throw it away.
Yeah.
But if you talk to recyclers, you can't go to refillables because we need the aluminum cans in the recycling stream to make money. It's perverse. Right. So I think that is another way in which, quote unquote, recycling hinders source reduction.
Yeah, and I think that's something we need to look at, because what we're doing is we are basically wasting a lot of resources through recycling still, and this earth cannot sustain that process, and it needs to be addressed head on at some point.
Also, aluminum.
We also have to look at the problem that if we really have our way with everything that we want, we're going to kill the consumer economy all over the world. So what are we going to do about that?
Well, why do you say that? Because they're still gonna get products, they're just gonna get different packaging.
Yeah, I think the change is in quality, not only quality of life, but quality of products. There's what some people are calling the small economy of scale. I forget the term, but the intangible things like having a job that's flexible or being able to walk to work. Those are the areas in which life can be improved without more production of things, goods. So I think the quality of life is the area that will hopefully we'll get a chance to see this, will substitute for people's satisfaction from consumption. In fact, there's a wonderful book that was written, I read the book once every 10 years, 1972, Limits to Satisfaction by William, I think it's Leis. William Weiss, I think it is. And it just goes into the cycles that we've not we personally, but that the greedy people have led us into, which restricts focus on quality of things and substitutes consumption of meaningless things.
Well, one thing's clear to me is that we're not going to improve things unless we talk about them. So one of the main function of these monthly meetings is to talk about things that might make a difference later on. And so to that extent, thank you, Neil. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Nikki, who's not on the call anymore. And thank you, Will, for joining us and sharing your story. Because, you know, I personally think it's if these things are going to happen, they're going to happen because the businesses make it happen. And the innovation that comes from small businesses especially is going to make that happen. The regulators aren't going to do it. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for joining us.